Um, I'll show you a few examples of some things you can do with buffer objects. Here's one. I've made it look reasonably pretty by means of the presentation view, which I haven't talked about yet, and is something which I obviously will be useful for making your stuff look pretty. So I'll talk about that a little bit, along with obviously the patch itself. This is Liddell Emulator, and as you see from the little blurb at the top of the screen, the patch is based on a performance I saw Jamie Liddell give a few years ago, in which he layered a series of recordings on the fly. This isn't an uncommon way of doing things, but it enabled him to build up harmonies and textures in the process. He did it by means of singing. When I demo this, I won't sing, but you should get the idea of what it does anyway. But basically, by clicking each of the number buttons in turn on the left hand side, the coloured ones, you can record into each buffer while hearing what you've already recorded. Obviously it works better with a microphone. I'm using my internal mic on my Mac, which isn't very good, but you will at least see roughly what it does. So I need to turn on the DSP, which I've done, and ordinarily you'd need to reset. So if I'd already worked with this, I'd need to press 0 to reset. So I click on number 1 and it will start recording my voice as I'm speaking. So blah 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 blah. And then I can click on number 2. The first buffer stops recording and starts recording me now. Along with probably a little bit of the original voice, because the speaker and mic are rather close to each other on this Mac. But I'll stop there, and you can hear the previous 2 recordings along with me talking now. And then obviously go on to number 4 and it does it again. So you can build up a sequence of recordings and have them play back all at the same time. I click on number 5 and all 4 of those play back together. And I I'd presumably not be talking at this point. And then press 0 and it clears the lot. So, how did I make that? Well, first of all, you can't see any of the gubbins because I am in presentation mode. So I will undo, I'll go back to patching mode. There's a button down here with what looks like a kind of presentation board on it. And here you toggle between your patching mode and your presentation mode. I'm currently in presentation mode, obviously. As you can see from the top of the screen, there's a little bracketed presentation thing in there. So click on that and it goes into patcher mode, and there are the gubbins. So how is this working? Well, we'll walk through the patch relatively slowly. It looks a bit complicated, and there's a couple of things in there which I won't have covered before. So bear with me while I explain some of those things. Things like the trigger object, which is this one here with the T, that we won't have come across. The U menu we have come across when we were choosing synth oscillators, but we are coming out of a different outlet of there, so I'll need to talk a little bit about that. But otherwise, apart from the kind of how I've configured it, which requires a bit of explanation, there's nothing here I don't think that we haven't already covered. But there's a bit of kind of lateral thinking that was required in order to set this up. That's if you can understand that, you can understand the way in which you need to be thinking about programming in order to build something useful. So we'll start with the top right hand corner of the patch, which is up here, and that is this is perhaps the most straightforward bit of the patch. So it's basically the buffer part of the patch. So we've got 4 buffers labelled my buffer 1, my buffer 2, my buffer 3, my buffer 4, and each one of them can accommodate 60 seconds worth of sound. So when I was recording through there, you noticed that there was basically 60 seconds worth of space in the buffers. And each of those is allocated a waveform display object, and we've got the set messages to tell them which one to refer to over here. So yeah, the trigger message requires a little bit of explanation. It's a kind of handy way of making sure that messages happening in the right order, or messages are sent in the right order. You might remember that with that there is this right to left convention in Max MSP, and sometimes it's quite useful to make sure that things definitely happen in the right order, even when you've got a load of objects distributed fairly higgledy-piggledy throughout your patch. And the trigger object always sends stuff out in a right to left order. So what you could do is, I'll do a couple of examples of what you can do with a trigger object. Again, you can call it trigger, or you can just give it a T, and that is a trigger object. And if I wanted several bangs to happen, then I can put in a bunch of Bs. And basically that means that instead of sending, say, an object like this to 4 bang objects, now I know that that's going to happen in a right to left order, but it may be that I were to swap something round to go over here, for example, but I still wanted this object to receive a bang before these 3. I couldn't do that using this method because the bang would always center here first. I hope that makes sense. I'm not sure that it's best explanation, but we'll go with that for the time being. Here, I could do that, because if I send the bang object to here, and then to here, and then to here, and then to here, we know at the moment that obviously this is going to receive a bang first, so I click this bang and the bang is going to come out of here, then out of here, then out of here, then out of here, so it's going to travel right to left. But if I move this one over to the right, the left-hand side, it will still receive the message, the bang message, before any of these 3. So it's quite a useful way of ordering messages, or making sure that messages are sent to particular objects in the right order. So you can send bang messages in order, you could send anything in order. So you'll notice here that I've got the clear message. So trigger clear, clear, blob, I could send set. I could send any message, and those will happen again in order. So if I send a bang to this, then the message set will be sent out of this right outlet, blob will be sent out of this outlet, and then clear would be sent out of this object. Outlet. So you can see that from the little balloon that comes out of there. There are also some reserved characters in the trigger message, which will which will send throughput certain data that you might send to the trigger object. So if I were to put in TI and then clear, for example, then if I were to send an integer message to the trigger object, then it would actually, I'll send TII clear, because that makes it more useful, more obvious as to why it might be useful. Then every time I change this number 1, the clear message is sent out of the right-hand outlet, so we see that in the print menu, window, but we get numbers out of the other 2 outlets, and those are corresponding with the 2 that we got. So we know that the clear message will go out first, so that might go to an object in order to clear it, and then you might send the numbers in order from right to left out of these 2 outlets. So that I is one reserved message. You also have F, which will be float, and S, which would be a symbol, and you can also send a list. So TL would be to send a list message. So again, if you would send the list to there, and it would send out the list at the same time, or in order with other messages that you might put in there, whatever they may be.